Welcome back to the Two Pointers podcast. I'm Trevor Everett, and we are joined here with Grayson Hill. Before we jump into that, we're doing this obviously after Game 3 here. You'll be hearing this either late, the day after Game 3 or morning of Game 4, now that we don't have this really awesome 3-day break in between games or whatever it is, an extra day. But, you're going to get it either way. Podcasts coming out, even if we only have one more game potentially. We'll talk about that here in a second, what we think about how a Game 4 is going to look for Dallas. Back is about as into the wall, up to the wall, however you could say, as you can get here, potentially forcing a Game 5. Before we jump into it really quick, don't forget to use code 2pointers for $20 off your first purchase. Last episode, we talked jokingly about Boston fans might not have a chance to use this one. That's probably still true. Not going to, repeat myself or beat a dead horse, but I guess Dallas is the dead horse. That was a really good pun, unintentionally. But baseball games, sporting events, concerts, whatever you're using it for, if it's a ticket, you're able to get it on SeatGeek. $20 off your first purchase. Code 2pointers, top of the description, SeatGeek app, link to their website. All the stuff you can do is right there for you. We appreciate the show support as well as for support from SeatGeek. All right, that scuffed promo out of the way. We are ready to jump into it. Before we do that, all the formalities have to still happen. Want to make sure we do that. Introduce yourself where people might not, whatever. People keep watching these, so we got to let any new listener know what you're up to and why you're here.
Right. If you missed 1 and 2, my name is Grayson Hill. I've been doing this with Trevor in some form or fashion. This is my third finals jumping on doing this with him. So we went live after games last year, and we both realized we like our sleep. And so now we are doing the next day. So he hinted at it. This is the third one. We may not have a fifth one. So get your listening and viewing in while you can, because the NBA offseason, while it does fly by, it is is most definitely going to begin next week. So looking forward to however many of these we have left, and enjoying the last little bit of the NBA season.
At this point, I kind of just we've made all the jokes, we've made all the comments we can make about this series, and unless something we've never seen in basketball history happens, I'm just kind of okay. I'm just kind of okay at this point. It's almost like therapy where I've talked myself into the same result over and over again, and I'm like, you know what, Mavs in 7. It's no, that's legitimately not possible now. And this is talking about the NBA history thing we've talked about many times, where I always want to pride myself on embracing NBA history and using it as a barometer for a lot of things. I will never pick a team that's this not pick a team that's this good that somehow, some way gives up 20-2 runs in the fourth quarter to a best player in a series where he got out in the 4-minute mark. So before we jump into that, this is documented evidence that we will never, ever, ever pick against a team this good again, because history tells us that it's only happened Michael Jordan, LeBron James, and Magic Johnson. That's it. Those are the three people that have ever done what Luka would have done. I'm tired of beating the dead horse. It's just Dallas is the dead horse. That's the joke, right?
Right.
All right, let's address the elephant in the room. Let me just get, we can't all right, what should we talk about? Beat around the bush. Boston continuously does the thing that we think they're always going to do. I'm just going to read a few things. 22-2 run in the fourth. Luka fouled out with 4 minutes and 30 some odd seconds left. 91-70 at one point for Boston. They scored 2 points the next 8 minutes. And then once they got to 93, they didn't score for 4 minutes and 37 seconds until the final moments. Are you surprised that we've now officially, have they officially broken through they won't do that again? Or is the thought always in the back of your mind where championship teams always overcome it? It's really less of a question. It's more of, where are you? I guess it is a question, right? Where are you with the fact that, do you finally trust Boston, one game away from a championship, not to blow a lead and do something stupid? Because we know they still can tomorrow night.
Right. I mean, this would have been, if it had gotten to the point where Dallas stole the game, it would have been the worst collapse in a finals game since me and you were born. So, I mean, it would have been that bad. I still don't think they're really safe, because they still do it, but they find ways to win now. They did it against Indiana. 3 of those 4 games were very close. They've done it in this Dallas series. They were down 13 quickly in the first quarter, actually. took a very solid first punch from Dallas, and they had it to a point by the close of the quarter. I think Tatum flushed one with about a second left. They cut it to 31-30. So we saw the inverse of the how in the world are we doing this again earlier, where you thought, they may roll over, punt the game, similar to the first two game twos of their playoff run. This one being on the road, obviously. But I think what more of an absurd way to essentially clinch a title than giving up a 22-2 run in 7.5 minutes in a finals game? And then, you mentioned Luka fouled out in the waning seconds with like 4:12 was the official game timestamp of when he fouled out with that atrocious attempted Olay defense on Jaylen Brown that you don't do with one foul, let alone 5. He picked up 5 20 seconds before that. So I'm sure we'll get to that too. But, trusting Boston, I guess in a way, yes, because they're not losing these games anymore, but no, because they're still going through the same self-inflicted adversity, like giving up 20-point runs, like falling behind by a dozen points in the first 5 minutes, which if you have a team down 2-0, you're going to expect something huge as your opponent takes their home floor for the first time in this series. So that I'm not really too concerned with. Obviously, they responded within the same quarter. And to their credit, they were bad for 7.5 minutes, and then they were at least defensively better for the final 4.5. Although, to your point, the best player in the series was disqualified. So, take from that what you will. The Tim Hardaway Jr. scoring drought continues. I think it's at like 26 calendar days now since he scored a point. So he's got a year left on his contract. I don't think we see him in Dallas the duration of his final year of his contract, but we'll get to that after some more important stuff. But trust him or not, Boston is inevitable. And here they are. They have 4 chances to win one game to raise their 18th championship banner.
All right. I'm going to read you just a matter of the 2 things I wrote down in a matter of 3 hours that just completely, and they speak to the point about what happened with the fourth quarter. I wrote down somewhere in the middle of the second, Tatum's decision-making in the first half was good. And then with 1 minute and 30 seconds left, I wrote this. Tatum had Washington on him with 1 minute and 30 seconds left. They're up 100-96. And instead of driving with space in front of him, he did a step-back 3 early in the shot clock. You have a rookie center that you can attack at the rim and Lively, who's really good at the rim, let me be honest. Like, he is. But he's a rookie center that if you're Jason Tatum, you know how to exploit and attack that. It was a terrible decision. And I'm not blaming that one play, but there was numerous plays that we would sit here and we'd just be reading the game log or whatever they call that, where it's the play-by-play log, and you're like, that play sucked. That play sucked. That play sucked. That play sucked. And then there were moments where I'm like, they did all the right things where they did the foul up 3 late, the decision that people always talk about, and the refs just blatantly missed it, where I'm like, Missoula's making the right decisions. Mm-hmm. Eventually you have to sit in front of the train. Eventually you have to jump into the burning building and stop it from being on fire. Right. And I had this whole thing written out where I thought I was going to come on here and just open up with an apology to Joe Mazzulla, but I don't know who to blame. I don't know who to make a fault for this, but somebody has to be responsible for this team, and it's not Xavier Tillman. Let me just put that out there for a second. It's not Xavier Tillman. Like, he held his own. I don't know what to say. Like, I'm not. People are going to sit here and figure out the blame pie, but like, Xavier Tillman held his own. Can you blame Porzingis for having 20? That injury hasn't happened but 20 times in like human history or something stupid like that. This tweeted a few years ago. I don't know. I don't have a point to this, but my point is Tatum's decision making ultimately is going to be this roundabout way for us to be like, when Jaylen Brown hoists up the MVP trophy, or if Drew Holiday has some like stupid 30-point performance and like defensive stops and blocks, and if they win tomorrow, like it's probably Drew Holiday. But the point is when Jason Tatum doesn't win Finals MVP, or we look at him differently in this overarching top 5 conversation that I kind of want to touch on towards the end, when we have that happen, it's going to be to his own fault, but to his. I don't know. It is what it is. That was kind of, again, no point to that. I don't really know how. Maybe you noticed something else, but it just had to be said.
I mean, the same way that, this is only similar in it happened to this star player as well, but Steph Curry did not win a Finals MVP until 2 years ago. And we were like, how in the world? Why? And obviously, there's no Kevin Durant in Boston, but still, it just speaks to you're perceived as the best player. It's your team, et cetera, et cetera. And then the most important individual award and the most important series of the entire sport, you're not collecting. So will that be a thing for him that eludes him? Obviously, he's worried about the team trophy and all this, but and he hinted at it post game too. He was like, I'm doing the things that were required to win the games. I'm just not scoring. I'm paraphrasing heavily there, but I think he was obviously tuned into the internet after 2 games, and he had a much better game to his own credit. And so I think that a lot of the alarm bells are turned off, but he's definitely not the front runner for the NBA MVP award. That is now Jaylen Brown. He does sit second in odds, which feels about right. The Drew Holiday thing was always kind of a this, and this has to happen. So the more likely trajectory for who's going to win that was one of the dynamic duo that sits atop Boston's roster in Brown and Tatum. So it appears right now that's Brown. But obviously, if they win the title, I know Boston's not a market that likes to be content and happy with things. And we'll get 17 first take segments about why Jaylen Brown is the best player or when Jason Tatum unfollows Kendrick Perkins on Twitter. But I just think that all in all, we've been so frustrated with this team as even loosely still constructed because they have not gotten to this point, have not secured the title. And I know they haven't done it yet. But 3-0 is 3-0. And I know 10 years ago, 3-1 was 3-1. But there's no LeBron James in Dallas. There's a guy who's a traffic cone if you drive against him, and he can't move his feet because he just plods around on defense, and he's complaining more than he's defending. And that kind of player, I don't care what Kyrie does, he can have 35 every other game this series. You're not beating this Boston team 4 times in a row. You're just not.
It took 12 minutes and 30 seconds for me to go already outside of this game, but I'm just going to do it now because you made a point in there that whether you ended with it or not, doesn't matter. It was said and it was good. Boston's contentment level with the fact that this would be their first Celtics title since 2008. This would be their first title as a city since 2019, if I'm correct. And it would give television everything in the world to talk about if they win this title in 4. I also can't ask you this after game 4 because ultimately we'll have at least enough time to absorb and digest this. So this question's harder to ask after if they already win, assuming that they win in game 4, which is still a big assumption because even, look, as much as I believe in certain things to be happening with certain teams and factors that go into these decisions, it's still really hard for just human nature to be like, they're going to get swept. The other side of the court has professionals that are really good at basketball, and ultimately it's a couple of top 15, top 30 players, right? I'm just loosely throwing Kyrie in a bubble there. But long-winded, are you going to look at this title any less for any reason?
No, because it takes so much to even get to this point, and breaks happen. I mean, there's the whole discourse about the Warriors didn't play a starting point guard for like 3.5 years in the playoffs, and that is what it is. There's a lot of things you can control. Who's up and going across the floor from you is not one of them. We saw Toronto benefit a lot from key injuries. It's not just the teams we like to hate, like the Warriors. There's always something that needs to go right. And unfortunately, one of the bigger factors is injuries because the guy can't hurt you if he's not there. Porzingis, in my opinion, which is not expert level in any sense, is he will not play again the rest of the series, whether he's pressed into need or not. This could be 2-1 Dallas. I still don't think he plays the rest of the series. There's the nature of that injury and how rare it is, and how I think just affected he'd be. He wouldn't be doing the team any favors by playing and eating up those minutes, especially when you consider guys like Tillman who can just be a body on the floor for a quarter-ish equivalent and hold their own, which I thought was a perfect way to put that. So less, no. I mean, it's been a long time coming. This team has been due. This is not some lucky streak through the NBA playoffs. This is not some new territory for them. I think the Eastern Conference Finals tally is 7 in 9 years. This is a team that's been right there many, many times. Their second shot in the final series. We talked about 2 years ago a lot how they didn't seem quite ready, and now they're kind of on the right side of that with Dallas now looking just not quite championship caliber, even though they did go through in almost everybody's eyes, the tougher conference this year. So, look at it less. No, I think we forget that you can win titles without the, LeBron, Steph epic battles for 6 and 7 games. Some years it's just not that exciting. We saw this last year. Miami tied things 1-1. We're like, oh, we're going to do 7 of these shows after the games, and Denver won every other game in the series, and it was over in 5. So, and we complained about 5 games, and here we are. We might get shortchanged even with that. So, look at it less. No. Will it play well on Twitter to say they cakewalk through the playoffs? Sure. Will Kendrick Perkins get on ESPN and say it? Probably. But that doesn't make it true. So I think that, is it the toughest road ever for a finals champion? Absolutely not. But it is still a road they successfully traveled down and won a championship. So,
you make an incredible point, though. Like, the frame of the question is not that ultimately is someone going to feel that way, because it's just true. Someone's going to say it.
Oh, for sure.
And you're probably right on who. But the thought process for me is, like you mentioned, the due thing. Like, they're due because history tells us that the Mavs don't win the title. Like, even all of the other stuff I've talked about with you for weeks now, history tells us that guys like have to go through it. Like, it's just rare chances where it really does happen. And they did. The 7 and 9 is incredible. The 22 finals, which we're going to talk about here in a second, I didn't prep you for that again. That one was slightly on purpose. But my whole point of the thought is, Howard Beck said it best. The Ringer, former SI for a really long time. Howard Beck, incredible person in this industry, said it best. He's like, yes, people are out there. The how to predict the talking head is not possible. But what is possible is looking at the win-loss column and looking at winning percentage, and they're going to be the third best winning percentage team in NBA history. That cannot, I left the silence in there on purpose, that cannot be understated, where I don't even think there's an argument for the path, because honestly, all of their work came throughout the regular season to put themselves in this position to be this good. The stuff they did the beginning of the year with getting Drew Holiday, getting Porzingis, and then keeping the core around them, Jalen and Jason, obviously. I said them in that order. That was accidental. Jalen and Jason, however you'd like to frame that. They did all the work to get here by sticking it out since 2017. So I'm not going with a rookie head. I mean, look, here's some more examples. Going with a rookie head coach last year and it looking really bleak, giving it another chance. And now, as much as I think of not so fondly of him, he's been incredible. He really has. Now, what will he do when Charles Lee is running Charlotte in about 24 hours? What will he do when Sam Cassell probably gets a couple interviews and maybe a job? I don't know. We'll figure it out because they figured that out before. My whole point is I can't even begin to believe that there's even an argument out there, and it's just going to be fabricated if it is.
I mean, it's just reducing what they did. To your point, they made the path easy for themselves by doing things correctly. They dominated the regular season. They made trades to improve a roster that they've kept together at its core since, like you said, 2017. That's extremely rare. That does not happen, especially in this era of player empowerment. Guys moving all over the place doesn't happen really a ton in NBA history because, you try for this long, somebody's getting shipped out, and it's usually a star player.
You remember the stat I read to you a couple of weeks ago, and I said this to Noah Dalzell. It may have not been with you, but either way, I'm going to say it now just so you know. I asked her in December when I interviewed her. I said, does this dominance surprise, and this is 2 months into the season. I said, does this dominance surprise you knowing that the only 2 guys from the bubble are Jason and Jalen?
Were those 2? Yeah.
Like that fact alone. I know we're getting, the further we get from the bubble, we can't be like, oh, that was just a couple. That was 4 years ago. But there are role players that stick around for 4 years. Mm-hmm. Marcus Smart wasn't one of them. We thought he was going to be like anybody. If we'd had this conversation, not even a lifer, just integral to a winning championship team in Boston. Mm-hmm. Life or whatever. Once he wins a championship, all bets are off, right? I mean, sure, he's like, oh, let me get more money, better deal, whatever. But yeah, I mean, Boston fans thought he was a lifer. I mean, that did not. The approval rating of Brad Stevens for about 3 weeks was, 3 months, but until they actually put on the floor,
lower than normal.
Yeah. And then here we are like 8 months later, and look at how it is. So I cut you off, but I wanted to make sure that was known to those who didn't know that, because it's really important to your point, because this is it. Like Jason and Jalen, all of the star power conversations aside about who's doing what and who should make more money and this and that, who's the better player. I mean, all of the stuff that gets brought up, some of it fair, some of it not. It's really important to the fact that they are the only two guys on this team. Previously,
Right. And at the end of the day, we care a lot more about that than the players actually do. The players want one thing, it's a title. They don't care whose pockets look like what. They don't care who's getting the more favorable look on Twitter or on ESPN or Fox Sports. Doesn't matter.
they see it, they think about it. Most guys like Jalen and Jason don't. You're right on that part.
It just does not occupy much real estate in the brains because it takes so much dedication to what they're doing and how they're doing it with teammates that will come and go inevitably, especially over a stretch this long. And so I think that, the bubble stat, the players, the two shocks me. I mean, I know there's only 13 guys on a team, and the bottom, call it 5 or 6, probably change completely every 2 or 3 years. But all the doubt and these two won't win a title. They need a third star. They need Kyrie Irving. As much of a disaster as that was, they kept the two of them together. And here they are against Kyrie Irving, who returned to form last night, but it still wasn't enough. So I think it's great that for maybe the most doubted duo in a very long time, just because they hadn't had the title run yet. And here they are 4 quarters away. So I think it speaks to how dedicated they've been to bringing a title to Boston, even if they're not treated fairly by their own fans at times. And so I'm excited to see, just the emotional release from both of them after they finally get this done. Similar to, honestly, LeBron when he came back to Cleveland and got that elusive title for that city. So I'm excited to see that.
I have a couple of things about just things we should definitely talk about. Some of it, I mean, look, if they sweep them, like, we're going to have to figure out how to talk about that. Like, we already are talking about things. Like, we're just making a huge assumption here, which is totally fine. But the series has told us this is where it's headed. And
right.
So
it's a win, not if now. So, yeah.
We can figure out what to talk about after game 4. So I'm just going to say a couple of things I think are important. But before we do that,
sure.
Do you have anything else about the actual game? I mean, look, I have only said one thing from game 3 that actually mattered. So, like, anything from game 3 that stuck out that we do need to address before we move
on? If you would like to add a worst timeout award to our end of season awards, Jason Kidd, come on down. Not that Luka Doncic passes up an opportunity to complain about anything, but he was in disbelief. The kid called that timeout when they had it to 93-90 with 5:25 left. I mean, 90 seconds later, Luka is fouled out of the contest. Tim Hardaway Jr. comes in. He was just, I don't know what role he needs to play on this team, but the 19 minutes one is not what he needs to be doing.
They were desperate.
And I get that, but at some point, your advanced stats guys on the iPads making $130,000 a year need to be like, hey, this is not working. It didn't work when we DNP'd him in game 2, and it didn't work when we played 8 minutes in game. I mean, he played 23 minutes, I think, in the Western Conference Finals and the finals to this point combined, and they threw him out there for 19 minutes. He was scoreless, like a -16, I think. And once Luka got disqualified, that's not really a choice at that point. But after that, demarcation in the play-by-play, it was 13-9 Boston and then curtains. So,
yeah, I mean, look, that's a good point because it brings up the desperation thought of what they were doing. And I don't necessarily knock Jason Kidd for anything other than the timeout because at that point you're trying. Kleber's obviously hurt. I did write down like the foul baiting. Like, I mean, it's not just the foul complaining. Like
awful.
They really, it was worse today or yesterday, whatever. It was worse in game 3 than it was in game 1 and game 2 because they really didn't have to rely on that a lot in this playoffs. They relied on a lot of 3-point shooting and some guys that kind of, some correction happens. You're going to be desperate. Like Derrick Jones Jr., we talked about after game 2, like just not shooting the confidence. Like, he doesn't even look at the rim at 24 feet, I think is what your exact quote was. And then now we're sitting here thinking about him going up at the rim and like swinging up into guys. Like, it just isn't like, it's desperation. Like, it's game 3 back against the wall. We know that, right? Like, that is what it is. But
sure.
Yeah. I mean, the foul complaining with Luka, believe it or not, I know with even what Brian Windhorst said after the game, which I think a lot of that's valid.
I was just about to bring that up.
It's brutal. It's just no sugarcoating. It's brutal. But a lot of it's true. The winners, losers things you maybe could have done without. But the idea of like, okay, it has gotten better because it was really bad in y'all's series, especially, and the series before.
Yes.
He obviously, they were in control of the Timberwolves series, so sure, right? But then the finals, like,
Yeah.
I can see both sides of it. He's been really bad, but he's also been not as bad if you've watched the playoffs. So it's kind of crazy to think that, like, even the fouls at the end where he thinks, like, I'm going to get into the defensive thing in a second,
Okay,
but
good. Yeah.
let's just do it now. The world, how do I word this? How do I word this so people understand my point? The world sure threw around the best player in the world title for a guy
Cannot.
that has no hardware and had one of the most piss poor defensive performances I've seen from a star in the finals in my lifetime. It's no question. I know you have something to talk about with it, so that's just that's my thought of it. That's really all I have.
On the Windhorse thing, I regret going to sleep before he popped on SVP after midnight and dropped 74 seconds of just he destroyed him. I recommend the version on Twitter set to mini men because it is hilarious. The tunnel thing, while true, that might not be best in that spot. But it just speaks to when a member of the national media who's supposed to be objective and even keeled and all this stuff is pleading with the powers that be, who's definitely tuned in because that went super viral this morning. It's got to stop. And to your point, it was not the worst it's ever been. I sat through 6 games of it. Yes, it was against my team, but subjectively, it just takes away from the excellent product that is NBA playoffs. I don't know how much more he's going to have to do before the league steps in and just has like a intervention with him of like,
They
you're
have to
probably
start
going to play
treating him
another
like everyone
finals.
else. They have to start treating him with technicals like everyone else.
That was my next point. Either they sit down,
Oh,
they're like, look, you're going
sorry.
to play another finals. And the next time you get thrown out of a game, it's going to be for text. It's not going to be for 6 fouls because
Yeah.
you're complaining. And you think suddenly you're going to lock down Jaylen Brown when you haven't done it all series. They've been driving at you, by you, through you, whatever you want
Around
to
you,
use.
everywhere. Yep.
Yeah. And you've got to know with 5 fouls, I don't care if you think you're above the letter of the NBA law and you're just going to go around and hack and not move your feet and this all the crap. But like, they can and will disqualify you, and they did. He picked up 2 fouls in literally 40 something seconds.
It's a
So
defensive play that even if his ability, because it's going to help your point here, even to his
mm,
ability, if you know Jason Tatum's moving that quickly, you don't try to take that because you're going to not be in position. It's just that simple.
you just can't do it. You have to know you have 5. When you get 6, your night is done. There's not 40 seconds left. There's 4 minutes of game left in a game that if you lose, your season's effectively over. And he just did not care. In his head, I think he holds himself in a higher regard than everybody. He was saying after the game, they've got to be better. You have to be better. Because if you were good enough to beat the Celtics team, you're not screaming at the officials all night. And it's insufferable. I think last night will truly be a wake up call because he did get essentially ejected with 4 minutes and change left in an NBA Finals game. So now he's got to think, well, if they're going to boot me on that stage, there is no, you know, safety bubble from punishment for how I'm acting. So I'm hoping that is a wake up call. I'm sure in Game 4 he will be at levels that will make him lose his voice all summer. But I think in the offseason, when he goes back and watches his tape, I would hope he's embarrassed by it because I think it's truly embarrassing for a player of his caliber who's even mentioned in the same breath as other players considered to be the best in the world. And I think if he had won this series, then there's a discussion to be had. But when he's losing it like this and acting the way he is, I think that it's going to take much longer than it would have under other circumstances to put him back in that conversation. Um, because he is truly, if there was some kind of like obscure stat on it, he's leading the league in it. And this is a Mavericks team that has shot so many more free throws than any other team in the playoffs, more than Boston this series. They just can't make them. Even after 14 of 18 last night, they're still back barely above 72%. Which, if you're not the better team in a series, that's not a great way to close the gap at all.
So I'm actually going to scrap the last question for a couple reasons. It will give us something to talk about even after Game 4, or potentially 5, or potentially 6, and under some unearthly reason, or Game 7. And I'd like to prep you for it more for the fact that I think there's an interesting thought there, and I'll prep you for it off recording. let's close with this. So the answer to the question is they need 60 plus from the two stars on Dallas combined. They need a PJ Washington vintage round 2 performance. They need the obvious things that are out there. So my question is not what do they need to win, but is there anything that you think they need to do differently at this point to at least force this into something interesting?
I mean, they got 62 from Luka and Kyrie last night, and it wasn't enough. And obviously, if Luka is eligible for the final 4 minutes, it's probably pushing 70. And who knows? They might win the game. But to your point on Washington, him and Derrick Jones Jr. scored at or above 40% of their playoff point total in one round, and it was against the Thunder in round 2. And it took that to beat that team, which is great. But when you peak and then your next iteration is to fall off a cliff, you just can't have it. And that's true for any team with any level of role players, whatever your opinions are of Washington, Jones Jr., even Lively as overall players. And Lively had a nice game last night for his sake. But I just think that there's got to be some kind of medium. You can't have them be lights out unconscious and then just holes in the court. I mean, you just can't have it. Luka and Kyrie are not good enough as a tandem. I don't care if they score 80 points. They could still lose the game because Boston 1 through 5 is better than them. And then Boston's bench, although maybe with Porzingis removed now, is not quite the advantage they once had. But we saw it through the 2 games they had Porzingis. It really wasn't close. The bench versus bench was laughable. And so I think that it's not even what they have to do different. They just need role players to play a role and be truly supportive of their 2 stars who can put up 60 points. They're capable of. They had not done it to this point because Kyrie was in some sort of funk relative to his normal production. But, I mean, they got what they needed for 44 minutes from Luka and Kyrie. It's just the other pieces, the guys, like a Derek White, who will win you a championship by what they do in the darkness, basically. And a lot of that's defensive too, which there's no question who's better defensively. But I think it's really, as weird as it sounds, I don't know what else you want from Luka and Kyrie other than a better demeanor towards officials. But I mean, it's going to take the guys that are not on the promo banners playing like they did anything close to against the Thunder. It just being above average relative to their normal play style. And they've been pretty poor through 3 games. And it's a large reason, larger than most people probably think, of why they've lost all 3 games so far in this series.
All right. 1959 Celtics over Lakers, 1971 Bucks over Bullets, 1975 Warriors over Bullets, 1983 Sixers over Lakers, 1989 Pistons over Lakers, 1995 Rockets over Magic, 2002 Lakers over Nets, 2007 Spurs over Cavs, and 2018 Warriors over Cavaliers. What do those things have in common?
4-game NBA Finals series.
That's correct. On the way out here, I don't think we've technically done predictions game to game, really, but it's more of just talking about what we think and how it kind of guides to that conversation. But when we're in front of a microphone one more time, whoops, sorry, I gave it away. Next time we're in front of a microphone, what are we talking about? Are we talking about Game 5 or are we talking about how Boston season went?
I, as a basketball fan, want more basketball. I can't give you a single reason why we're doing more than one of these again.
Yeah,
so I don't know. They, again, did not score 100 points. I went and personally pulled it. We haven't seen a team not exceed 100 points of regulation since LeBron had Mozgov and Dellavedova in 2015, and he about did it himself, scoring 40 a game. So something's got to change. I don't think we see a reborn Dallas team that's capable of taking on an opponent this good, whether it's historically, statistically, however you want to say it. So I think they go out on their shield as respectably as last night. I think it's a single-digit game. It's worth watching for 4 quarters, just hopefully for the sake of the last game of the NBA season. But I think we're talking, Tatum Brown legacy in Boston sports, etc. Come Saturday.
All right, and then I guess if we both assume it's sweep, 30 seconds, finals MVP. Who do you think happens, and who would you give it to potentially?
I think it'll be Jaylen Brown. I think he's been the most consistently productive player for Boston. I think Tatum has had a good game. Drew Holiday has had a good game. Kristaps Porzingis had 2 good games. But I think when you look at as far as like that steadiness that we have not found in Dallas, the team down 0-3, I think when you flip it to the team that's been victorious in the winner's tunnel, as Windhorse would put it, I think it's going to be Jaylen Brown. And I think that, all the undeserved criticism, his contract, etc. I think that will all fade a bit, hopefully, at least.
It should disappear entirely for the time being.
Oh, it should. I'm with you there. But yeah, so my official pick is Jaylen Brown. It's not going on a limb. He's now the favorite. But I think that exists for a reason. So I will take Jaylen Brown.
All right, plug away on the way out of here. Anything? I know college baseball's cranked up here. As people are going to hear this, College World Series starts at 2:00 on Friday. I bring that up. People are probably like 36 minutes in going, why is he bringing up the College World Series? I'll let you tell them that, but there will be plenty to talk about here soon. This pod will go up early Friday morning or the wee hours of Thursday night, probably. I guess technically I should say the date for those confused in about a day, but the 13th is when we're recording this at night, and because of the unfortunate one game turnaround, we will get you'll get this, but you got about 12 hours to listen to this is kind of my point. So let people know where they can find you to talk about things that aren't the NBA Finals potentially.
Yeah, so me and my 2 college roommates who do not watch basketball in any form ever have a podcast called the 1009 Podcast. We talk all things Clemson athletics. The current athletics is college baseball. The Tigers are not in Omaha. Trevor's Wolfpack are, which is why he mentioned that. 4 ACC teams, 4 SEC teams scoring off in Omaha beginning tomorrow, Friday the 14th. I'll still be watching. It's going to hurt because my team's not there, but we'll talk all things that. The thriller that the Tigers played against Florida to unfortunately close their season this past Sunday. Just looking at the fallout from that, really, and looking ahead to football a little bit. So we're on Twitter at the 1009, Apple and Spotify weekly. All the links are on the Twitter. So if you wander over there and hit follow, then I would greatly appreciate it.
Yeah, just how the committee wanted it. 4 ACC and 4 SEC schools. And funny enough, in a couple of months, maybe it might be 6-2 ACC, SEC at that point. But that's another conversation for another day with a lot more time. Like you said, at Grayson_Hill, 1009, all of this stuff will be linked below. Don't forget to use code 2POINTERS, $20 off your first purchase, SeatGeek.com, link in the top of the description for that. Greatly appreciate the support on that and on the show as well. Next time I talk to you, we're probably going to see an NBA championship be held up above Jason, Jalen, and the rest of the Celtics heads. Until then, we'll talk to you soon.